Welcome back to Earth Staton Trek, a show where we trek from the early days on NBC to the future on Paramount Plus and everywhere in between. I'm Charles Kelso, and it's my privilege to introduce the Earth Staton Trek crew. Keith Johnson.
Keith, your microphone's off.
We do it again. Kill, 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 kill.
Alan Seiler.
Peace through superior firepower.
And Veronica Daschle.
Hi.
All right, Alan, do we have some news this week?
We do. We have a new cast member that's been announced for season 2 of Startrekprodigy.
Awesome.
And this is Michaela Dietz, and she is playing a character, I'm guessing, called Majel.
Okay.
Basically, it's Majel Barrett's first name, but with a thing in it.
Yep.
And this is a new Vulcan character, and she is joining the ranks of Robert Beltran, who plays Chakotay, Robert Picardo playing the Doctor, Jason Alexander, who plays Dr. Noom, David Diggs, who plays Commander Tyses, and Jamila Jamil playing Ensign Essentia. Oh, and Ronnie Cox playing Admiral Jellicoe. So this is all the Starfleet-based characters that we know have played a recurring role in season 1 and are going to be continuing into season 2. So we're very looking forward to seeing what Michaela's bringing to the show and this new character and why she's named after Majel Barrett. I mean, why wouldn't she be named after Majel Barrett? But I'm very excited. We had a new Vulcan character.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. The new run of Star Trek has brought us a wealth of great female Vulcans.
Yeah.
Like almost every show has had a cool female Vulcan. They've all been very unique from one another. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do here.
Absolutely. And just really quickly, Matt Sweatman says, hello, fellow Terrans, and that he loves the Prodigy cast.
Indeed.
And, now Elaine says, I love David and Jamila.
Awesome.
Me too.
Yep. All right. Well, looking forward to that. Keith, do we have any This Week in Trek this week?
Yeah. One thing I thought was interesting. Today's episode, we're talking about episodes of Trek that we rarely talk about. And one thing, when we were talking about it on Facebook, I said, well, do you mean bad episodes that nobody wants to talk about? And Alan, whose idea this was, said, no, it's not that. It's just episodes that are rarely talked about. Well, this episode is not rarely talked about. On June 26, 1967, a final draft was submitted for a little episode called The Doomsday Machine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that one's been mentioned.
Yeah. Talk about
every single week almost.
No,
right.
I mean, if you do a poll of Star Trek fans, that is almost always the number one episode that they say, if I could get a movie out of that, of an original series episode, because it has the action, it has the whole thing with the planet killers, it has the thing with Commodore Decker. But what a great episode. And it was funny, in addition to that, just looking at the list of episodes we rarely talk about, going back to seasons 1 and 2 of the original track, it was really hard to find an episode that we just never talked about because there's so many great ones. Just a wealth. And then it's funny, now we can go from one that everybody talks about to one that is never talked about. And I don't know if it's even bad enough to not be talked about, but it's ignored. But on the 27th of June, 1968, a year or so later, was the first day of filming of And the Children Shall Lead.
Oh,
for an original
I never
episode.
want to talk about.
Exactly.
We mention that one almost every week.
Ugh.
That, we say all the time that there's very few Star Trek episodes that any of us truly hate. Like, we just despise them. That is on my list of one that I really can't stand.
Right.
I think I've seen that thing twice in 50 years.
And
that's too many. And the thing is, it's never talked about. It's never talked about like Spock's brain is so bad, it's funny. It's just never talked about.
Which one's the children, Shelley?
That's the one with the friendly angel, and the children have a little chant, "Friendly angel," and then the kids take over the Enterprise, and it's awful.
Yeah, I've never seen that one. I don't think you've let me watch.
Not in this house. Yeah, because people have seen Spock's brain because it's fun to watch.
Yeah,
and it's goofy. But no matter how bad someone thinks it is, it's an entertaining episode of television. And in my opinion, the Children Shall Lead is not.
Agreed. Yeah, you're not missing anything, Veronica. You missed nothing by not seeing that. Trust me. And the last one I thought was very interesting. In 1964, on June 29th, 1964, this is an OS episode day. Gene Roddenberry and company submitted 3 scripts to the network.
Oh.
The titles Gene Roddenberry submitted was one called The Women, one called
The Women.
The Women, right, which is actually going to be Mud's Women.
I figured.
Yeah.
World, do y'all know what that was? Because I couldn't find a description what the plot of A Perfect World was.
And I don't.
I think it's an episode, I'm almost sure it's an episode Gene Roddenberry wrote, which is basically a being of great nobility is crucified on an alien planet.
Oh.
I think it was Jesus crucified on an alien planet story.
Right.
Yikes.
Think about this, 1964, submitting this for television science fiction. And of the 3 submitted, the NBC executives were extremely concerned, but they decided they would greenlight the 3rd episode that he submitted called The Cage.
It would have been interesting to see Jeffrey Hunter facing off against Space Jesus.
Yeah. Oh, that was a good point. I guess most people know Jeffrey Hunter played Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's this week in Trek history.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, so this week we decided to talk about episodes we never talk about. And Alan, you suggested this topic, so did you want to cue it up?
Sure. So I was thinking about episodes that just sort of fall through the cracks. They're not ones that are like big Klingon episodes or have a notable thing that happens to one of the main characters, or it's just one of those average middle of the week kind of, it's a good episode. It's not anything that's special, and therefore it's not one of the big tentpole things that people tend to bring up in conversation. And there's some of those that I really enjoy, and there's a couple that I like are favorites of mine, but we've just never talked about them before. So I thought it would be fun for us each to come up with something that we don't have any recollection of ever discussing on this show and just bringing it up and talk about why we like it.
That's every episode for me.
Well, that's true.
But
is
we
true.
did watch
That's
some
not
specific
true,
ones.
because the 2 TOS episodes Keith mentioned earlier, you said, I feel like we talk about that every week. So
There we go.
That doesn't mean I remember the episode. I remember the name.
oh, I see.
And I'll probably remember the episode when you mention it, but I won't remember it,
Okay.
and I won't associate it with the name.
So, and I want to say that none of us have talked about what we're going to be bringing to the discussion tonight. So we
Right.
don't know what each other is going to be bringing up. We may have all thought of the same episode. Won't that be interesting? Out
That'd be
of
hilarious.
hundreds of episodes to pick from, we may have all selected the same one. So we'll see. But I'm looking forward to seeing what each one of you have picked.
Okay.
And let me get at this comment from Matt before we jump too far ahead. I'm betting someone will bring up an episode that others will remember being talked about.
I'm
That's what
sure.
I'm thinking too.
And I would challenge people, if you think we've talked about them before,
Mhm.
go back and listen to the episode you think it's from, and then
Yeah.
post to us in our Facebook group. I
Yeah.
would love to be proven wrong.
Indeed.
And also, if you are thinking of one that you don't think we ever have talked about, put it in the comments, and we'll get to, I would love to hear what some of you are thinking of.
Absolutely.
So who would like to kick it off? Hey, Veronica, how about you?
Okay, so I'll pick one of the TNG episodes that we watched. I don't know the episode name.
Well, which one is it?
It's where Troy
Man of the People.
Man of the People.
Mhm.
Wow.
That's the name of it.
Man of the People.
Man of the People, where Troy gets possessed by
Basically, this ambassador.
Telepaths.
Yeah, this ambassador guy sort of comes
yeah.
onto the ship, and he starts having an effect on Troy.
Yeah.
Right?
And basically he's like putting all of his negative thoughts and feelings that he doesn't want while he's ambassadorizing. So what doesn't distract him. And
This is
putting
verbatim
them
from the
all-
back of the VHS tape, by the way.
It might be. I feel like they had very charitable descriptions.
Does anyone remember this episode?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Veronica, do you like it?
I
Is it
do.
an episode you like, and is one you think we would be a good one to discuss at some point?
I don't think it's a good one to discuss for an entire episode.
Basically, it's the Troy gets horny episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The alien makes Troy horny.
Yes.
Yeah. And so she's sort of rapidly aging,
Okay.
but also sort of making her way around the ship.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
forgot about the
Yeah.
aging
She does
part.
get older. She also gets
Oh, yeah.
more scantily dressed and sexy dresses. And there's probably the most famous thing from the episode is that screen cap of her answering the door in her nightie.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And a little else. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That surprisingly made it on TV in the early 90s because that was
Right.
I don't know. That they didn't have HD in mind when they dressed her for that.
But also, this was a show made for syndication.
Yeah.
So that does
Yeah.
change things a little bit.
True. That's true.
So, Veronica, why did that make your list of something that we really talk about?
Because it was what Chuck turned on.
Ah,
I figured TNG was a good place for sort of forgotten episodes we never mentioned because there are a lot of episode of the weeks in TNG that aren't the big
Right.
ones. And so I selected a few that we watched together.
one comment I would have about the show, it's an interesting episode because it perhaps unintentionally kind of continues a running theme of how do we abuse Deanna that ran in Star Trek. It's a weird thing that happens quite a bit. The only thing that was kind of weird about the show when you didn't know what was going on is you remember there was the lady who was the old crazed lady who tried to attack her because that turns out that was his most recent paramour that he had dumped all his negative emotions to, and he basically had aged her. And the only thing that's kind of interesting about it is the concept of dumping negative emotions into someone else telepathically isn't new in Star Trek. That creature Armus was a physical embodiment of his entire species' negative emotions. That stupid oil slick that killed Tasha, for those who don't remember. I can't spoil this for Matt and Elaine. I won't say anything. There was something else I was going to say about Vulcans, but I'm going to leave that alone. But let's just say it's happened before. It's happened before in Star Trek, and even this really crossing the streams. Marvel Comics has characters called so-called cosmic level beings, where races take their negative emotions and put them into something else. So, and it's not a bad episode. Actually, it's not horrible. It's watchable. I guess I'd say watchable episode.
It feels very much like a young male writer's room. Who
Yeah.
had a great idea one Friday night and wrote an episode about Troy. Dressing in 90s and sexy dresses, and at one point she has a little rendezvous with an ensign who she it's weird, and it's one of those that her behavior goes on way too long for no one on the ship to like tackle her and take her to sickbay.
Absolutely.
And it'll come up again in another episode that we watched, but there should just be standard protocol. It'd be like a good thing for lower decks that someone just starts acting strange or has an off day, and someone just tackles them, and they wake up in like an isolation booth in sick bay.
I mean, Mariner kind of did that in the
Plus-
first season with Boimler's girlfriend.
Yeah.
This girl's
Plus, if you're only going to get one or two like episodes that feature Deanna per season, this is not one of the ones that I would ever go back to.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
agreed.
there are so many other really good ones that this one is just, it's kind of awful. It's kind
One
of
thing
sad.
that I enjoyed in it was that Riker was concerned about her and annoyed at some points, and then increasingly, but he was never really like, when there was an incident, he wasn't like being jealous Riker or anything like that. We just recently talked about sort of his reaction to the Worf-Deanna relationship and how that affected them in All Good Things. And this one, it was more, call me when you're ready to work. This behavior is unusual for you, that sort of thing, rather than him trying to be jealous about her or anything like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, who's next?
Well, Charles, why don't you
Okay.
tell us?
Well, I'll jump in with the next TNG that we watched, which was Identity Crisis.
That's one of mine.
Oh, man. Bingo.
Go ahead, though. Yeah, you
It's
take
super memorable because Geordi turns into an alien, like a glow-in-the-dark alien.
I actually remembered this one.
Yeah, well, that's
Hey.
a very memorable visual, but one that I just
Mhm.
I never go back to, and it just never
Yeah.
comes up in conversation. And the story is that years ago, Geordi was on this away mission, and now years later, the members of that away mission are being drawn back to the planet, and several of them die trying to get there, and that sort of thing. It's Geordi and a lady who was on the away mission with him, and they're being affected as well. And they eventually sort of evolve into these like neon blue aliens. But along the way, that happens where she starts acting super weird, and then he just tackles her and takes her to sick bay. And I mean, comment like that should be standard operating procedure in Starfleet. Like, you're being really weird this week. Let's go get scanned.
Right.
It's enjoyable enough. It's not one that I would go back to a lot. It's not, and it falls back on the, she was like a sister to Geordi, and he would go to her for dating advice because he had such trouble with women.
Yeah, I hated that part of it.
Yeah, that was stupid.
Does anyone ever buy LeVar Burton having that much trouble with women?
No.
I mean,
it's cool because it has another one of the Star Trek kind of tropes of the beings, the parasites, of the organisms. They reproduce that way. Like on Earth, we have wasps that lay eggs and spiders, and they eat them from inside out. And this species, that's how they actually reproduce. They get inside a being and literally convert their DNA. And what was interesting, Chuck, at the end of the episode was interesting is some of the other members of the landing party they didn't save. They were lost. Remember?
Yeah.
That was kind of creepy. They were like, well, we can't restore them, so we got to leave them on the planet as whatever they are now.
Yeah.
The thing that I loved about that episode, and the reason that it kind of like sticks in my head and was the first thing that I thought of when I was putting my list together, is that scene where Geordi is reviewing the sensor recording of the incident.
Yes.
When they were on the away mission where this happened, and he keeps going over it, and because something's wrong and he can't figure out what it is that's wrong, and until he finally like starts eliminating characters from the recording until he realizes that there is a shadow that nobody is casting.
Yep.
And that's when he realizes that there is an invisible alien who is sort of amongst them and doing something. And first of all, you never see it where an invisible people or things cast a shadow, which they should. But also, he then uses the computer to sort of create a model of what a very general model of what the figure would look like and where it's standing to cast that shadow. And man, I love that scene so much. It was so creepy to me. The whole thing about there's somebody amongst you and no one knows about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you're all busy. And had you noticed that there was a shadow that's not being cast by one of your friends, you would pick up on it, but everybody was doing their job, and and then years later to discover that there's something there amongst you that isn't supposed to be there. Oh man, I love that so much.
It was. I remember that scene as well. Oh, and by the way, Elaine, spoilers for TNG, because I just realized we're talking about some episodes of TNG. Alan, it's funny you mentioned it because I remember that as well. The same thing is that whole thing where he was recreating in the holodeck. It has an eeriness about it.
Yeah.
It's really eerie.
Like it has little nighttime animals in the background, and the woods surrounding you, and it's in the dark, and there's shadows everywhere. In addition to the shadow that Geordi finds, it's just a little like creepy. Also, Geordi changed really fast.
Yeah,
like it took her a while to like go through the stages, but he wasn't having like any symptoms, and then he was like full on.
Yeah. Well, you're coming up toward the end of a 45-minute episode. You got to get this on the road, man.
Right.
Got to keep it moving.
And Elaine, this won't spoil anything for you. It's just a description, but I still remember it because the scene when Geordi beams out and he's being converted is one of the best quick effects I've ever seen in Star Trek. Because as he beams out, he kind of appears and the eyes look weird. And then and I remember them talking about that little 5-second scene took a long time for them to do. It's a great scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. And real quick, one detail that I enjoyed was that in the flashbacks, Geordi was in the red uniform.
Yeah.
And they are like the TNG uniforms. I thought that was nice.
Forgot about that.
Yeah. Right. Let me get a couple of comments, some that goes back to the episode that Veronica was talking about and some that pertain to this one. So first we have Matt saying, leave it to Charles to have a VHS copy of Man of the People.
I actually do not.
Elaine says maybe do an episode about all the pervy and sexy scenes in Next Gen. There are plenty. That's a great idea. We should definitely do that.
Well, it's two different things, Elaine. Pervy or sexy? Which one?
I mean, why can't they be both? Just saying. Our good friend Wayne says, old and sexy, not enticing me for a look-see.
I will say that she rocks the look.
Yes.
They go straight from sexy Troy with a streak in her hair to then like old lady Troy.
Yeah.
Old lady Troy.
Yeah.
Matt says, I love Identity Crisis. I really like the character of Lieutenant Commander, whatever her name is, because I don't know how to pronounce that.
Well, I'm amazed that Matt knew the name of that character.
Me too. I can't
because I was reading the description today. I was kind of going back over to because I haven't watched this in a million years. So I went back to the description to remind myself of some details. And I was like, who? I don't remember that name at all. So good job, Matt.
I watched it 2 days ago and I couldn't tell you her name.
And then Elaine says, you're good. Good. I'm listening when I need to and not listening if I don't know what y'all are talking about.
Excellent.
Right,
by the time they're in season 3, by the time they get to these episodes, she will have forgotten this until they start watching.
Oh, that's what she's talking. I got it now. Talking to the spoiler alert thing. Good. All right. Wait. Matt now says, I'm reading the Cisco biography and she is mentioned there.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, that's surprising.
Yeah, that's a deep cut.
Yeah, it is.
All right, Keith. Totally.
Well,
because if she had like randomly shown up on Lower Decks, people had been like, "Who?" All right, Keith, tell us what you've got on
talk
your
about
list.
one we rarely talk about. This is one that is considered so bad it's good, and it's one I can watch just because it's silly. And those who know where that kill comes from. That is from the original series episode called The Alternative Factor, which, believe it or not, is also a season 1 episode. How do you get from, something like the Corbomite maneuver to The Alternative Factor? And Veronica, you might know this one. I don't know if you know this one at all. This is the one where there's
is that the one where we're in the weird space buildings and Sam Kirk is there? Is that one?
No, that's Operation Annihilate.
Okay,
yeah.
I knew it had a weird name. Okay, never mind.
This is the one where the dude with the beard named Lazarus comes from an antimatter universe, and he keeps swapping between the good Lazarus and the bad Lazarus. And the whole show is basically dude falling off a rocky cliff like several times. And the reason, one, it is so bad, it's good. And the other thing is it's a study in what can go wrong with an episode and how actors who are good actors gamely work their way through. There are so many Star Trek episodes I think about where they start off really promisingly and then they end, to me, disappointingly. Like it's got a great first half. It's got a great opening. By Any Other Name is one of those for me with the Kelvins. It starts off amazingly, and I kind of hate the ending of that show. But this one starts off with a really cool thing because at the beginning, even Spock is freaking out. The ship is being shaped by what Spock says is literally space-time contortions. And not only space-time contortions, when they're looking at the planet they think is the source of it, Spock says reality itself literally winked out of existence. And for Spock, and even Spock's looking a little nervous. So you're like, oh man, this is going to be awesome. And you're thinking it's going to be this great battle and all this kind of good stuff. And they say that the effects of this thing are being felt as far away as the Klingon Empire. So this is like, Discovery level universe ending stuff. And then they get to the planet and there's this dinky little craft. And there's this crazy dude with a raggedy beard and a bad uniform who honestly yells, kill, kill, kill. And you cannot tell. It turns out the good guys from the antimatter universe, the bad guys from our universe, you cannot tell who's who because they keep swapping places. And it's just a fun and funny episode because Shatner and Nimoy and all the rest of the cast they're doing their best, but the show just doesn't work. And it's also famous because one of the famous Barrymores, John Drew Barrymore, was supposed to play the main guy, Lazarus, and he just didn't show up for filming.
You realize how bad it was?
Yeah, nobody knows why. He just didn't show up.
Yeah, I think they did go after him through the union because they got set back and had to recast, and it cost them a lot of money.
Yeah, they took it to the Screen Actors Guild, and they took him to arbitration, and he couldn't excuse what he's doing. I think he was on a bender, honestly. And he he couldn't work or get paid for acting for 6 months. And that's a big deal back then.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the alternative factor, for one, the script isn't a Star Trek script. It feels like a Buck Rogers TV episode. It just doesn't feel like the Star Trek universe.
Right.
But also it's one where like the production problems are very evident on the screen, and like they just had to cut together the footage that they had. There's no like continuity between Lazarus's beard. His beard is all over the place through the episode. The episode is just a mess.
It is. It's fun, and it's also, you're right, Charles. The other thing about production, it's one of those funny episodes where this dude appears at the center of what could be a reality extinguishing event. And at one point, Kirk is talking to McCoy, and McCoy has seen crazy Lazarus and sane Lazarus, and Kirk goes, "Where is he?" And McCoy goes, "I don't know, Jim. It's a big ship. He could be anywhere." Like, what? He's just walking around, and he drifts in engineering steals dilithium crystal. It's a crazy show. But unlike in the Children's Relief, you can have fun with it.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. My buddy Tony Bowers says the alternative factor, a masterclass in terrible acting.
Yeah.
And Matt Sweatman says, I don't think the director knew which version of Lazarus was in any particular scene.
I'm not sure the actors knew.
No.
This is true. They did not.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. That's probably likely.
Yeah.
All right, that was a good one. Well, let me tell you, we're at 8:27, and we've already run through our episodes. Do they all have more than one?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, good, because I only had 2, so which means I only have 1 left.
And Charles took one.
Let me tell you about this one from TNG season 1. So this may have been mentioned when Elaine and Matt were on and they did their review of Next Gen season 1. Because I missed that episode. But I did watch it, and I think it may have got mentioned, but I don't think it got talked about in any kind of detail. So I want to tell you why I really, really love the Arsenal of Freedom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it's, first of all, it's just a fun episode, and it's pretty fast paced, and it's less serious than a lot of the first season Next Gen episodes were. It really needed, it was just like when Jet Reno came on to Discovery. That show really needed to stop taking it seriously, and Next Gen was kind of in that same boat. But Arsenal of Freedom, to me, is really kind of the first time that they start to really get the formula that they really need to get to for this show, for this cast. This is one that everybody gets a pretty significant cut of the action. Everybody is well written for. Every character gets something vital and interesting to do. And most of the characters get put into a role that they're not normally seen in, where you start to see new things about them. So first of all, Tasha and Data are on the planet trying to take out this weapon system. And it's one of the few times that you get to see Tasha in actual like badass mode, where she's actually showing you that she has combat skills and she's not just answering the phone on the back of the bridge, hailing frequencies open. This is one where she actually gets to do something.
Yep.
Likewise, Troy actually gets to do something that seems very counselory, because Geordi is put in command of the ship, and his command is challenged by the chief engineer of the week. And he has to be, he's kind of like doubting himself, and she pulls him aside and gives him this really great pep talk that it's rare in the first season to see her actually do some counseling, to see her actually being a counselor. And I felt like that really gave her something. It wasn't a big scene. It wasn't a long scene, but it gave her something very significant to do. Meanwhile, down on the planet, Picard and Crusher have fallen into this big pit, and they are cut off from the ship because their communicators won't get out. And she has been injured, which puts her in the role of patient instead of doctor. And since Picard can't get to the ship, can't reach the ship, then he is now put in the role of caretaker instead of captain. So you get to see new facets of those two characters because they're cast in these new roles that you're not used to seeing them in. And I really love the episode. I think that it's got so many great concepts. Everybody gets a lot of great stuff to do. It moves quickly. Seeing the whole idea of an arsenal that is for sale. And this is a sales pitch. This whole thing is a demo to get you to buy this guy's arsenal. And each time you see a weapon, it ramps up in strength and in reaction time, and it gets harder and harder to beat. And I think, it just keeps the stakes upping, and I really have a great time watching it.
Okay, so I have two thoughts. I don't remember this one. That's not a thought, though. Just from your description, what was Riker doing?
I don't remember.
Riker.
Okay.
I know that he was talking to another captain at one point, and then he was in some kind of stasis thing, I think.
Yeah, Riker got put in stasis, and what the system did initially. Also, Alan, it's funny. I wrote this one down as well, and one of the things I like about it, one of the things I like about it is in the original series, if you remember, you could hardly throw a stick at an episode where they didn't say some other ship that preceded the Enterprise got blown up, the crew killed, or something like that, and the Enterprise survives. And this was a throwback because the previous ship that had come to this planet had been destroyed by these people. By their weaponry. And what they did to try to fool Riker is they had a holographic recreation of the captain of the ship that was destroyed, who was actually Riker's friend from the Academy. And the way he tested him, the guy was really quickly trying to get Riker to tell him about basically the specs of the Enterprise and any weaknesses. And then he talks about his ship, and he goes, what's your ship? And he goes, it's the Lollipop. And he goes, Lollipop. He goes, yeah, it's a good ship. And then that's when I realized, okay, this is not my friend Paul somebody. And something else you said, Alan, I love you right that scene with Troy, because Mr. Logan was the really obnoxious engineer who wanted to take over. And he outranks Geordi. It also shows, and Wayne may be able to comment on this, because I've read this before, that whoever is captaining a ship is the captain, as it were, no matter their rank. And that's Logan evidently couldn't make Geordi step down because he was commanding the bridge. But I love it. You're right, because Geordi is clearly flailing. He calls Logan to the bridge, and Logan says, now this is some good acting. Over the speaker, you can hear the arrogance. He goes, I'll be there. I'm on my way. And then Troy doesn't tell Geordi, you're flailing. She tells him that the helmsman and the navigator are lacking confidence.
Yes.
And they're not handling the situation like he's handling the situation. And that snaps Geordi into command and makes him show confidence. I love that scene.
Yes. And so the weapon system on the planet is taking out individuals. There's also a weapon system in orbit that's attacking the ship. And when he calls Logan up to the bridge, and Logan's like, well, he's giving in and I'm going to take over. His plan is to separate the saucer from the star drive. And he sends engineer Logan off with the families, get them to safety, and Geordi takes the main battle part of the ship into the battle. And man, it's so good because you get to see this whole turnaround in Geordi's personality.
Right.
And this is still when Geordi is just a lieutenant junior grade. He's just the pilot, he's not chief engineer yet. That happens next season. And he's just kind of the goofball who sits at the front of the ship and has one-liners and quips his way out of situations. And this is a new Geordi, and that's one of the reasons that I love this episode.
Yeah, and early in TNG, Geordi did a lot of being the guy who looks at the view screen and goes, "Wow," like, "Holy cow," things like that. But yeah, I think this is a great turning point for him. We didn't get to see Geordi in command of the Enterprise enough. I'm glad in the latest season of Picard we got the opportunity to see that in that final mission of the Enterprise D. But I really enjoyed this episode. This is a perfect episode to watch when you're a kid because it's got like the drone things and the sales guy who at that time, I knew him as like the angry subway ghost in the movie Ghost. He was very memorable character actor back then. But Yeah, it's a super entertaining episode, and the show still kind of feels at that time like it's trying to, like I was mentioning last week, it's trying to get out of the TOS mold, but it still has a foot firmly in that TOS look of the planet and just the sort of feel, the sort of cartoony feel to things. But it's a fantastic episode. I enjoy that one.
Yeah, it's the first real ensemble episode that we got from Next Gen.
Okay.
Yeah, something else Alan pointed out real quick, I do love is at the end of the day, with all that sophisticated technology, which they destroyed in orbit, by the way, and a really cool thing, the drone was cloaked, but Geordi pulls the ship into the atmosphere, and they watch the wake and the turbulence that it creates in the atmosphere, like a shuttle entering the burning, and that's how they target it. But what Alan pointed out, what I love is at the end of the day, that dude was just a car salesman. He was just a smarmy salesman, and that was the whole thing. He's like, "Isn't this great? Isn't this great?" And then Picard figures out when you say they buy, he's like, "Okay, cool." Great.
So a couple of comments. Wayne confirms that Keith is correct. If they're in a crisis, he is justified to hold command until it's over.
There you go.
Thanks, Matt says Geordi gets his revenge over Logan and takes his job.
I never thought
that was
of
going to be my second comment on the episode. So, yeah.
Let's see. Wayne also says that 2 serious situations that they managed to be a fast-paced episode laced with humor.
Yeah.
But
and he also, sorry, go ahead.
I think that he was referring to, because he actually had a suggestion for an episode for us to.
Yeah, and I think I read them out of order, but I didn't know what this one
I got you.
pertained to. And he asked if anyone had Rascals on our lists. I did not.
No.
Did any of y'all think of that one?
Well, no, because we talked about it.
Yeah, we've mentioned it before, but yeah, I really enjoy Rascals. That's one that I like. That I think it's better than people recall.
Yes,
I agree.
I have a very clear memory of that episode, and when he said the episode, I knew what he was referring to. So clearly, it's a memorable episode.
Yeah, but it also has a memorable title.
Yes,
where a lot of those one-word titles that are like space, and you're like, which one's that?
Right. So a little side story is that one of the guests that we've had a couple of times back when my convention was called Timegate, because we were still doing Stargate content, was Diana Drew Botsford, who had written a number of Stargate novels, like tie-in novels, and had done a lot of other television work too. But she is the one who wrote the original story that went to screen as Rascals.
Wow.
Oh, cool.
And she gave me an autographed copy of the script.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. One last thing on Arsenal.
I absolutely adored her.
That is cool.
Sorry, I was just telling you how much I adore Diana Botsford. She was amazing.
I'm sorry. My speaker cut out, so I couldn't hear for a second. That's why I'm talking. One last comment on Arsenal Freedom when Alan mentioned Picard and Beverly in the pit. Beverly has Picard basically break a plant and taste the sap, because he uses it. He uses it to basically stop her bleeding. And it was funny because he asked her why or how does she know that. And evidently, I forget what it was. Beverly had been on some really major planetary crisis. There was some situation she'd been in. And he just goes, "Oh, you were there." I don't know what it was. It was something pretty bad. But one reason I really loved it is because I love it when the Star Trek doctors do old school, real world kind of holistic medicine. Now, if anybody watches Enterprise, they know Phlox, that's all he does. He's got like bats and stuff in there.
Right.
But I love it when they go old school, because when Matt and Elaine were watching season 2, I commented on that episode where Dr. Pulaski has a male nurse who says he doesn't know how to make a splint, and that just freaked me out. He goes, "The bone knitter doesn't work." She goes, "Make a splint." And he goes, "A splint?" And she tells him what a splint is, and then she leaves. And I'm like, is she gonna let him make a splint? Like, how the heck can you be a doctor? I don't care if it's in the 24th or 50th century and not know how to do a splint. So I love the fact that Beverly knows old school like plants, because McCoy could rock the heck out of some plants. He had found them.
Yeah, but I bet there would be some doctors 400 years ago that would be shocked by some of the medical practices that current doctors don't know how to do. You know?
That's true. That's true.
Like leeches. Nobody uses that anymore.
Just drill a hole in his brain. You never drill a hole in the brain?
Yeah.
And one last thing is that in the scene where they're in the pit, Beverly was supposed to tell Jean-Luc how she feels about him.
Oh, yeah.
But Gene Roddenberry nixed that.
Oh.
I didn't know that. He was against it?
Yeah. Not necessarily against the relationship, but I don't think he wanted it to happen then or that way. I don't know. I don't.
Interesting, because that's a meme for years.
The
Every time
reason
they're
behind
about
it,
to
but
die.
he did. I know.
Interesting.
I know.
Wow. Because after that, there's several episodes where they're about to die, and she goes, Jean-Luc, in case
No,
we
I
don't
know.
make it, there's something I want to, and then he didn't tell her.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we also
All
watched
right.
a couple of Voyager episodes.
Well, do we want to take a break?
I'm sorry, what?
No.
Okay. Sorry, your lag is real bad, Alan. We're trying.
Yeah, we're having some lags here. That's what's going on.
Oh.
So I think Alan said time for a break.
Sorry.
Or,
Okay.
take a break.
Yeah, you want to take a quick break for a commercial, and then we'll come back with some more?
Sure. All right, here we go.
Look up, look down, look out. Here come the monkeys.
Mickey,
David,
Mike,
Peter,
We're talking about them in Monkeying Around. That's right, Monkeying Around has everything, including
interviews,
episode reviews,
album discussions,
and other incredible surprises.
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
That's a good podcast. I like that podcast.
It's a great
This
commercial.
is a good podcast.
We both recommend it. Yeah, so I was saying we also watched some Voyager episodes.
And I was realizing that they're both about sleep and dreams.
Okay, that's true. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
which
true.
ones?
Yeah. Well, do you want to tell them about the first one we watched?
Yeah, so it's
Do you remember the title?
no.
You don't remember what it was?
No, I don't remember the title.
Yeah. The title was Remember.
Okay, so it starts and B'Elanna is like in a nightgown and she is asleep, and then she like rushes over to the window and has this little flowing nightgown and throws open the window, and there's a tall guy standing there, and she's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I was waiting for you." And then they like embrace and then eventually get over to the bed. But number one, I couldn't get a good look at the guy, and at first I thought it was Paris, and they were in a holosuite, but because I couldn't see the guy. But later I learned out it's not him. But that was the opening, and it's this whole story about how there's these telepathic people on there, and apparently they have the ability to share their memories with other people. They can that's how they teach each other, is they like share their memories, and now you have my memories, and now you can use that to play a musical instrument. But someone was dumping her memories into B'Elanna because they had done a terrible thing and had basically eradicated part of their people because they didn't believe the same things that they did.
It starts off it's like B'Elanna's getting sucked into a romance novel.
Yes.
And then it turns into more of a Star Trek. But I had no recollection. I was really just shocked that Bruce Davison is in this episode. And I was like, I don't even remember him being on Star Trek, much less being on this Voyager episode. And I'm like, where did he come from?
No.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a great episode. It's a perfectly fine like episode of the week though. We've talked about those before, where some Star Trek episodes are really great, some are terrible, and some are just like, oh, Star Trek was good this week.
I enjoyed it. I would watch it again.
Okay.
It's funny, Veronica, because I have that one written down as well, and because like you said, what's really wild about it, what's chilling is, as you said, the whole thing that is going on is there's an older woman who had a love affair with a young man from what was basically a rival faction of people. And her father was the main guy who led what was ultimately the genocide of these people. And what's more frightening, it's not that she resisted. In the end, she gave in as well. In the end, she, as you think about from the Bible, the apostles who denied Jesus, in the end, she stood by and joined the system of her father and knew her lover, who she was deeply in love with, was going to be killed. And decades later, she's full of regret. And it's one of those, and I hope I'm not pissing anybody off by saying this, in our real life world, the Turks will not admit what they did to the Armenians in the early 20th century. There was a whole genocide of the Armenians, and to this day, Turkey won't talk about it. And they did that. And this lady, basically, she could not talk about it with her own people. They didn't want to hear it. It's like, I don't want to hear nothing about it. And so she dumps it in B'Elanna. And it's a really great episode for Roxanne Dawson, because she has to play this. Think about this, like you said, the show starts off, she's basically having an incredibly explicit sexual dream.
Mm-hmm.
And then she has memories in her of her lover being carried off to be killed in the genocide of which she was part of because she stood there. And at the end of the show, the anger and the fury and the disgust in B'Elanna is just it's kind of heartbreaking because she got that stuff dumped in her now. She's carrying that guilt. It's wild.
Yeah. And I thought the alien species was pretty interesting. They were like, there's a scene where like he, you know, an older man is like, Janeway's looking at the musical instrument and he's like, dude, would you like to try to play it? And she's like, sure. And so he stands behind her and like does a thing, and all of a sudden she's playing, and like she's like weirded out by it, and he's weirded out that she was like, he didn't know that she would react that way. He's like, I thought you knew about telepaths. I did. Oh my gosh, I never would have. It's just an interesting, like, really awkward encounter between two species that, you know, have slightly different abilities and cultural norms.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have my Veronica moment. I have zero recollection of this.
You don't remember it?
Maybe
that's why they called it that, because no one remembers this episode.
And it's a perfect example of one, we don't talk about. But it's actually a very good episode. And ironically, interestingly, Voyager did this more than once. There's another episode where Ensign Kim and Chakotay get beamed down to a planet, spoilers, and they basically end up in a war. And what you find out is each one is being programmed by the other side to hate the other side. They even see people differently. Voyager was also, Deep Space Nine did as well, but Voyager was really big about memories. And then, of course, everybody has to do the Miles O'Brien is most famous for Hard Time, where he got the memories implanted in him. Voyager did the same thing. So it's a very interesting thing that, you know, they did this more than once.
Right.
I remember the one that you're talking about, Keith. I remember that one very well. That was a great episode.
So look up the episode, remember.
I am looking for, I'm going to go home tonight and I'm going to watch the one that Chuck is talking about, because I feel like it'll be like a brand new Voyager episode.
It was for me.
That's exciting.
It is good, and it also is one where it's not just the standard. B'Elanna is short-tempered and mean, and she's trying to hold her Klingon side down. She gets to act.
Yeah.
Did you have another one, Keith?
Yeah,
exactly. I did. I had gosh, which one was it? Oh, it's funny. I had two from Voyager, and I put them together because they have the same theme. And they are Mortal Coil, which features Neelix, and Emanations. Mortal Coil's from season 4, and Emanations is from season 1, which features Harry Kim. And in both episodes, this is a crisis of faith and a crisis of theological faith. I love it when Star Trek deals with faith. Like probably most people my age, I was raised in the church. My dad was a preacher. I have my beliefs and so forth. But I think what Star Trek always did was, Star Trek was very weird about religion. I don't know if Gene Roddenberry could really be called an atheist. I know he was a secular humanist. I don't know if he was an atheist or an agnostic, but he was spiritual. And what Star Trek always tries to do is say, you can be a good person and spiritual. What Star Trek typically does is when somebody says, do you believe? They'll just go, well, I don't think we know everything. But in Mortal Coil, that's the in Emanations, it's really wild. I won't go all the way through it, but Ensign Kim, long story short, gets caught into this on an alien planet where he finds out, ultimately they find out that people when they die are transported to what turns out to be a moon, I believe even in another dimension. It's part of their religious ceremony. And what they're basically doing is they have this whole ritual to take their loved ones to heaven, to what they think is going to be their heaven. And Ensign Kim ends up getting sucked through this portal, and what he finds is a chamber of a whole bunch of bodies, just bodies after bodies. It'd be like if you woke up in an Egyptian pyramid next to a dead pharaoh or something like that. Right. And what they find out, and there's a lot of stuff that happens, they actually have to kill Ensign Kim to bring him back. But what he finds out is, and there's a lady there who they actually managed to revive. What they have done is they've stumbled onto somebody's religious beliefs, and there's a whole question of, by trying to get him back, do they destroy these people's religious beliefs? Because they may tell them there is no afterlife. And the way Star Trek kind of hedges their best to spoil it at the end, all that Janeway says was there was some weird energy emanations they detected around the site where those bodies were. And all she says was, I don't know. And it was kind of one of those, who can say? It's a great episode for that.
I love that episode because it's a subject matter that Star Trek doesn't normally address, or at least not in this way. where it's treated as something that's a real thing, like this is an actual experience that he's had. And my favorite part of the episode is at the very end when Janeway tells him, you've had this really profound experience. Why don't you take a couple of days off? Go write a poem, write a song, draw a picture, just find a way to express these feelings that you're having, this confusion that you're having, this questioning that you're having. Find a way to express that and find a way to like make it into something. And because Janeway is very much the hard scientist.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that she is giving him basically the freedom to take artistic expression and make it into something. And I love that. That's one of my favorite Janeway moments.
Yeah, and then quickly I pair it with the other one. You could actually do a pairing. The other one for season 4 is Neelix. It's called Mortal Coil. And be really brief on this. And long story short, same thing. Neelix dies. Neelix is dead for a really long time. I mean, a really long time. I'm talking like hours or several minutes, long minutes. But of course, now 7 to 9's in the show. So miraculously, those Borg nanoprobes, which can do anything, 7 manages to revive Neelix. And long story short is Neelix has always been comforted by his beliefs because most of his family had been killed in a horrible war. And he used to even tell Naomi Wildman bedtime stories about the great tree where everybody from his people would go to when they died. And he was dead for so incredibly long. And when they bring him back, he didn't see the tree. He didn't see his family. He didn't see his beloved sister. And his faith in everything he believed in, spiritual and religious, was shattered. And
vague memory of that.
Yeah, it's another great episode where they're like, what do we do now? And then he even says at one point, you should have just left me dead. Then I wouldn't know that what I believe wasn't true. And then, of course, and now, like you're saying, Janeway and people who don't believe, now what do you tell somebody? She's like, well, maybe you weren't dead long enough. He's like, I was dead for like half an hour or something crazy like that. And so then what do you tell them? What do you tell them? It's a tough one.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good like an episode of the week. It was very memorable. It's one of those though, like the downside of the episodic storytelling back then was that like these deeply held beliefs that are very important to Neelix, like you never hear about before. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if Neelix had deeply held beliefs and then they were shattered? Whereas if he'd been talking about that for 4 years and then he found out it wasn't true and it changed him going forward, that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
Another thing is that Ethan Phillips rarely got a meaty episode where he's really called upon to do some really dramatic acting. And there was another one that was, I can't even remember what it was, that I didn't think really came together. This one I think really does. I think this one is an excellent episode, and he does just a phenomenal job in it.
Absolutely.
Well, he really benefited when Kes left the show, because the Neelix episodes prior to that were really about Kes, or about Neelix and Kes. Where once Kes was off the show, and they had to like, well, now we have to think up things for Neelix to do, and then they came up with some good ones.
Right.
Yeah, true. A couple of comments. Matt Sweatman says that he has looked up Man of the People on VHS on eBay, and the back cover description wasn't nearly as entertaining as Veronica's.
They should have found me when I was like 3.
Right.
And he also says, I forgot a lot of Voyager episodes. I've seen most of the episodes only once when they aired. I've seen most of Voyager a few times, but somehow, I mean, I know that I've seen every episode. I had a dream one time about having watched a Golden Girls episode that I had never seen before, and I know that's impossible because I've seen them all like 50 times. But in this dream, it was like, what? There's an episode I've never seen, and I kind of feel that way about this Voyager one that Chuck is talking about. I can't wait to watch it,
Matt.
And I know once I start watching it, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, I remember. But I can't wait to see it.
Matt, I think Chuck said it best, which is Voyager is an absolutely solid Star Trek series. It is not great. It's not bad. It has moments of greatness, but it's absolutely fine. And to do a dovetail, Voyager, you see what would have happened if Berman and Braga had continued to hold the reins of Deep Space Nine. And thank goodness they didn't, because it's a perfectly serviceable show, but it's nothing great.
I was sort of down on Voyager for a number of years, but then I sort of came back to it now that television has gone so serialized. Yeah, I get kind of nostalgic for just the spaceship shows up at a planet this week and what's the adventure, and we don't get that much anymore. And I think Voyager has a lot of those really good science fiction stories of the week.
I agree.
And I thought this topic has been really fun because it's a lot of fun. There's always those episodes that you just scroll past when you're looking for an episode to watch. You're like, no. Like, it's like, stop on those sometime. You know, you may get some surprises.
Yeah, and I want to also thank Wayne's suggestion for Rascals, because that's a fun episode.
Yeah.
And it's fun to see the woman who plays a young Guinan. You can kind of believe it.
She's perfect.
She's great. And then it's weird, and I'm not going to spoil this for you, Elaine, but it's weird to see a young Ensign Rowe laughing. It's just weird, because I'm enough said. And the funniest thing is the young man with all the red hair who plays, "Hey, Captain Picard, number one, I want you to do," and it's just it's a great episode when Wayne talked about it could be funny because you've got to put your brain on hold, because you got like 3 Ferengi who take over the whole freaking Enterprise. It's insane.
Okay, one final comment. Matt Sweatman says, I intend to give Voyager a chance to win me over when we get to that in our watch through. But you're going to do Deep Space Nine before that, right?
Surely. All right. Well, this has been fun. So next week, on 4th of July, we're going to be talking about new Star Trek episodes again.
Yay!
Yeah, we'll be talking about the first 5 episodes of Startrekprodigy. So, yeah, that was July 1st. Those episodes drop. So everybody, you've got a few days to watch all 5 episodes, and then we'll be back on Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, going live, talking about the first 5 episodes of Prodigy.
Can't wait.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yes.
Awesome.
All right, Keith, where can people find more of you?
You can find me on X and Facebook, primarily the ESO Network Facebook groups.
And how about you, Alan?
CosmicCreative.com. KOZMIC creative.com.
And what about us, Veronica?
Feltnerdy.com.
That's right. And if you're in the Atlanta area, we have a big show. It's our first co-headlining show we're doing with another puppeteer, a fantastic marionettist by the name of, he goes by Puppet Pants. But he's great. So we'll be doing the first half of the show, and he'll be doing the second half, or vice versa. And we have a special code. If you want to buy tickets to go see it, there's a code for people who listen to shows on the ESO network. Veronica.
ESO 2024.
Yep. So
$5 off.
Yep. So you can find us at feltnerdy.com or on social media. Our all ages stuff is under Felt Nerdy, and then our adult stuff is under Felt Nerdy and Dirty, and you can find the event link there. And where else can people find us?
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
That's right. And do you have a closing for us this week?
Oh, yes. Hold on. It was from the it was
from the episode we didn't talk about, but go ahead.
A Chuchi Moya.
No, it's a Coochie Moya.
A Coochie Moya?
How do you not know a Coochie Moya?
I don't know.
Like I,
I typed it out phonetically, and I was not reading it properly. Coochie Moya.
Yeah, you'll never guess who featured in that episode. We'll get that one next time. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Bye, y'all.